I'm Tony at News. Valuation Office agencies set the rent allowance that you can claim on universal credit, etc. And that's set under a rate called the broad market area. Now, broad market area in my area would be Southampton City, or Southampton broad market area, which would be Southampton City, but it goes much, much wider than that because it goes outside into Test Valley to Romsey. It goes into Waterside area, which would be New Forest District Council. It goes over into Eastleigh, which is Eastleigh Borough Council. And it may even go as far as Fareham. I'm not exactly sure. But the point is that they set a rate based on private rents, right? And they set a rent, a maximum, the 30th percentile, so the 30th way up the chain, of £1,050 for a 3-bedroom house. You cannot rent a house anywhere in the local authorities I've just mentioned for less than £1,300. Now, I go on Rightmove and I put in 3-bedroom and I put a 3-mile radius and I put in 5 or 6 postcodes around that broad market area. Now, we're not being fussy, we're just looking for a modest mid-terrace 3-bedroom property. This is not for myself, this is for somebody I'm trying to help. The Valuation Office, somebody's been gerrymandering the results to bring the rents down by about £300 or £400. Well, now if you're on universal credit, how does this really hurt? I mean, this is about your children, your grandchildren, it might be yourself, but the point is that if you're on universal credit, you go to work, you get deducted tax and national insurance, then DWP allow you a certain amount and then they start deducting at 55% of what you take home. All right? So you can't make up £300 or £400 worth of difference because you might be earning £11 an hour, but you're only taking home £3.50. By the time we've had all these deductions. So you're on £3.50 an hour. To make up £300 or £400, you need to work an extra 100 hours a month. And quite frankly, the businesses that pay £11 an hour do not want you to earn. They don't want you to have the hours. They want everybody on 16-hour contracts, and then they give you overtime, and you might get yourself up to 30, 40 hours. But they don't want you to be working an extra 100 hours in a month, over and above your normal income. So it's very important that the Valuation Office get these numbers fair and right. So now, how can you deal with this problem? Well, firstly, we've got to start some freedom of information requests and really hammer down on where they got their numbers from. Because so for the 30th percentile, so if that's 30th percentile would be that far up from the bottom of the rent, right? Now, that's the number they're giving as 1,050. The minimum I can find is up there at 1,300. There are people paying 2,000 a month to rent a house. So where are these people who are paying £400 a month? Because they must be the dumbest landlords in the world. Because the going rate is £1,200, £1,300 a month. So how are we going to beat this stupid system? Right, the Valuation Office, we put in freedom of information requests to them. Every broad market area needs somebody putting in a request asking for the data that they're using, right? Then you need to look up your housing rent, which I'll put a link to in the bottom in the description. And then you also need to register your rent that is above the housing allowance, right? Because next September, and this is how crooked this system is, right? Next September, they will take those numbers and set the housing allowance for the next April to April. So it's always going to be 6 months behind the true market rents. But I can assure you, we were looking for a house last summer. So last summer, the rental allowance was actually right down at 925, and the cheapest house was at 1,300. So this sort of £375 a month shortage before you started paying your bills, right? That's just not fair when somebody's working at £11 an hour, right? Now, they brought it up to the 30th percentile because Rishi decided to freeze rents in 2019, thinking he was King Canute. He could stop the tide, right, of rental rises. He thought the universal credit was driving rents up. That's a completely separate argument. I'll tell you that at the end. But anyway, he then announced about November that he would be raising it in April. Again, it's always tomorrow. Anyway, in April, it rose to the 30th percentile of these false figures from the Valuation Office agency, VOA. But these numbers have been, you just can't find these rents that they're claiming exist, all right? Right, what is driving rents up? Well, I know the first thing people will shout at is immigration, and that is part of the problem, right? But there's 3 huge problems going on, maybe 4. One of these big problems is obviously there's a shortage of housing. Strangely enough, it's down to pensions. So you can only save £2 million in your pension, right? Now, that sounds, who's got a £2 million pension? Well, actually, I've got a quarter of that sum as part of my standard employee pension, right? And I'd never earn more than 32 grand a year, all right? But a doctor, once he's hit that £2 million, right, what they find is they get taxed at an extraordinary rate on what they put in their pensions, right? So what they start doing is buying holiday homes, and then they also buy buy-to-lets. So I know of a judge who owns about 6 houses, another one in New Zealand, and him and his partner, they're quite happy being a judge, sitting in on divorce cases and people poverty and and evicting people because they can't pay the rent. Well, they're sitting in holding on to 6 or 7 houses themselves. And the same goes with GPs. They've got holiday homes that they rent out. So they might have a couple of holiday homes. And it's because you've stopped people putting into a standard pension pot, which would invest in industry in the UK and things like that, they're investing in buy-to-lets and holiday homes. All right? So, you've got to start looking at the whole picture, that this pension policy is both stifling investment in UK industry, and it's then also harming the housing market. So personally, I'd like to see that reformed. All right. Now, immigration is an issue. It's a difficult one because, firstly, the people who are coming in unlawfully in little boats are being housed by local authorities who have the power to spend over the budget. All right, that's driving rents up. We've got people going to university, and then when they finish university, they're moving south. The south coast is absolutely stuffed full of people. Now, bigger issues. we've got too many people, we've got not enough water and not enough housing. And we literally had our water turned off for 4 days this year, and no warning. You can't. They were actually planning to put a desalination plant in Southampton water and pump water out of the sea, take the salt out, dump the salt back in the sea. All right. Anyway, another issue. Right, Valuation Office. You need to get your rental figures. You need to put your rents in and register for next year to try and bring the universal credit rate up. And remember that this is going to help. Any of us could be made homeless at any time, or our children could be made homeless at any time. And we need the system to be fair, that you can rent a house within budget. It may not be the prettiest road, but you still need to be able to rent a house within budget. And I can tell you, there is nothing out there. There is nothing out there in the Southampton Broad Market area, which is a huge area, and you're going to be paying £300 to £400 over the housing allowance rate. Anyway, I'm Tony, Ant News, signing out for now. I'll update you on my freedom of information requests. Like and subscribe and share to other renters who are having the same problems.